From Pacifica Radio, this is Democracy Now!
President Aristide told me he'd been kidnapped by U.S. soldiers and tricked by the U.S. ambassador.
Today we speak with Kim Ives of Haiti Progrès, just back from the Central African Republic, where he met with President Aristide. Here in New York, residents sue the EPA over post-September 11th health hazards. And with Enron, Adelphia, Halliburton, and Tyco, we'll take a look at why Martha Stewart has become the poster child for the Bush administration's so-called crackdown on corporate crime.
We feel Martha Stewart is a target because she's a woman, and she's been targeted for that reason.
All that and more coming up. Is it for freedom? Sarah Thompson here on Democracy Now!, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
And welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and those of you around the world who listen in on the internet. A delegation of activists, journalists, and lawyers from the United States has just returned from the Central African Republic, where they held a series of meetings with Haitian President Jean-Bertrand Aristide. In fact, it was the presence of the American group in the Central African Republic that ultimately forced the authorities there to allow Aristide to appear in public and hold a press conference. Earlier this week, Democracy Now! Did an extensive interview with Aristide. It was the most extensive English language interview since his removal from Haiti.
The delegation that's returned to the United States is holding a news conference today at the National Press Club. The group includes one of Aristide's lawyers, Brian Concannon, as well as representatives of the Haiti Support Network and the International Action Center, who went to the Central African Republic representing former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark. Kim Ives was on the delegation, editor of Haiti Progrès, the newspaper. He had a chance to speak with Aristide in the Central African Republic in Aristide's native Creole and was able to piece together what's probably the most comprehensive picture of what Aristide says happened to him and his Haitian-American wife the morning they were forced out of Haiti. While the delegation was in the Central African Republic, we had a chance to speak with Aristide, an excerpt here.
First of all, I didn't leave Haiti because I wanted to leave Haiti. They forced me to leave Haiti. It was a kidnapping, which they call coup d'etat, or for some others, nothing else than something which is resignation. For me, it wasn't a resignation. It's a real kidnapping under the cover of coup d'etat.
He said it was not a resignation. It was a kidnapping under the cover of a coup d'etat. Kim Ives joins us in the studio right now, an editor of Haiti Progrès. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you, Amy. One.
Well, can you tell us what President Aristide told you and how it differs from what we have heard?
Well, I think the reports we've heard, and I think the definitive account was in the Washington Post, was that the U.S. intervened around 4 or 5 a.m. when Luis Moreno, deputy chief at the U.S. Embassy, came by.
4 or 5 a.m. on what day?
On the 29th. That is Sunday morning, as if he just came in to basically respond to Aristide's call to get him out of there. Well, the Washington Post report is good in the respect that it makes clear there was a quid pro quo plane for a signature on a supposed resignation letter, it really minimizes the U.S. role. What President Aristide explained to us was that the U.S. pressure really began 12 hours earlier. For half a day, he was locked in a battle with pressure phone calls and diplomats and military that had surrounded his home. They had come in and, as has been reported, the Steele Foundation, which was the unit which the company which had provided his close security, was essentially dismissed by the U.S. Armed Forces, their former employers. And they were taken by helicopter to the airport while Aristide was told that if he did not resign and cede power, he would be left defenseless and would be killed.
To just go back, and it's important to get the facts, given all the confusion around this. In other words, on Saturday, his security were dismissed, and he was left without security.
Correct.
On the Saturday evening before the events that the government claims happened.
Right. That's the essence of the gun that was put to his head. They removed the security in the face of this band of quote-unquote rebels, which is most surely U.S. Financed and fomented, headed by Guy Philippe, former U.S. Special Forces trained police chief, trained in Ecuador under their guidance, and Jodel Chamblin, the CIA-supported death squad leader. And we see that they were essentially saying, if you don't accede to our demands, we will let these people come and kill you. So, and in addition, the thousands of Haitians in Port-au-Prince, they were essentially saying they would unleash this rebel force on the city. Now, how much damage this rebel force could have done is another question, because they're not that big, and the people had really dug in their heels. But nonetheless, Aristide apparently felt enough pressure that he felt he had to bow to these demands.
Now, when he left his home sometime around Sunday morning, around 4 or 5 a.m., what happened then?
Then he was taken in a cortege of U.S. military cars, and with Moreno, he was taken to the airport.
Moreno being
the deputy chief of the U.S. Embassy.
Who has been in Haiti a long time.
Who has been around.
I remember him back in 91 when he was actually the one who was certifying which Haitians could get political refugee status in the United States.
Right. He was part of the vetting program of what was, in essence, an Operation Phoenix in Haiti.
And he's had a long history. As I interviewed him, he was in Peru during the time of the Shining Path. He was in El Salvador. He's been in a lot of hot spots around the world as a State Department employee.
Right. He's a real technician of the empire. I think the essence was that the embassies of both the U.S. and France had asked Aristide, or had, I think, even drafted from one of the accounts that from somebody else who spoke to Aristide told me, that they had in fact drafted a resignation for him, which he refused to sign, and that was a lot of the struggle during the night. In the end result, he drafted his own letter, which was couched and had a conditional clause in it, and to him provided him the wiggle room to say that he had not in fact resigned, which is really a moot point because it's clear it was forced no matter what you say. So this was the essence. He was taken to the airport. He found his Steele Foundation corps there, and they were put on the plane. And it was interesting. He explained to us that they felt it necessary to take these 19 Steele Foundation employees, including the one-year-old child of one of them, who one of the soldiers one of the security guards had had a child with a Haitian woman. They took them all to Africa because, according to Aristide, they feared that one of them might leak the news about their kidnapping. And so they took them all to Africa and then flew them back to the United States, which was an interesting
Kim Ives,
revelation.
I was struck in your written description of what Aristide told you, that you said that when he left his home that night, that he expected he was going to a news conference?
Right, that was part of it. It was trickery. James Foley, the U.S. ambassador, had told him that he would have an opportunity to address the international and Haitian press, and furthermore, that his home would not be looted. First, he did not get a chance to address the press. He was just bundled directly onto the plane. And secondly, almost immediately after he left, his home was looted. And it was after it was looted that they posted a guard. So this shows you, and not only his home was looted, but the Aristide Foundation, which housed a medical school, was also looted. And this was in the Democracy Now! Interview. I think he talked about that too. This is now where they are housing the soldiers of the U.S. in this medical school in a country which has 1.5 doctors per 11,000.
Kim Ives is our guest. He is an editor at Haiti Progrès newspaper, a Haitian weekly. We are going to break and then come back with him. After we speak with Kim Ives, we'll talk about what's happened at Ground Zero, the lawsuit of residents against the EPA, and then take two interesting perspectives on Martha Stewart. Stay with us. Jean Rabel here on Democracy Now!, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Our guest, Kim Ives, an editor of Haiti Progrès, was part of a U.S. delegation that went to the Central African Republic this week to try to see President Aristide. Before we go on, and if you could just answer your phone, Kim Ives.
Sorry about that.
If you can describe what happened when you got to the Central African Republic.
Well, we went direct to the gate of the palace because we couldn't get through on the phones. And this is part of the thing you have to understand. First, it takes 2 days to get to this country. You have to take several airlines, and we got the one direct flight a week from Paris, and even that is an ordeal. And when we got there, we found a phone system which is intermittent at best. This is all part of the isolation they've put him in. They've got him ensconced in the palace, Bokassa's former palace, supposedly for his security. So you have this ring of security around him. So we finally decided, well, let's go to the palace, even though we knew it was a long shot. First of all, to approach the palace, you can't even drive along the wall to it. You have to approach it down the street, driving about 3 blocks, I guess, so that they can determine whether or not to fire on you. We got up to the gate and were met there, of course, by armed guards. A guy came out and said, well, I have to check if you can meet. He went in and came back out and said, no, the minister said no meetings on Sunday. I said, what minister? He said, defense minister. I don't know why I was calling defense minister for a meeting with Aristide. And then we proceeded to say, well, can Aristide come out and meet us? No. Can we send him a note? No. Can we leave him a telephone number to call us? No. So absolutely no contact with him was allowed. We went back to the hotel, and then we learned from other press who had been there that this had caused a real brouhaha in the palace, that they had hastily called a press conference where they brought Mildred Aristide, President Aristide's wife, out. And even this was quite a comedy, because they had told the press when they got there would be no pictures, no video, and no recording. The press, by and large, left. They had to call them back. Then they said, okay, we'll allow recording.
Is it true that armed men came in and told all the photographers and video people to close their machines?
That is correct. And in essence, the press stalked off in protest. Finally, the press conference went forward, and Mildred Aristide was posed a question by the Reuters correspondent, and she said, well, I take my leave from the foreign minister, in essence asking him if she could respond. And he just stared at her, she stared at him, and there was no answer given. And they persist. They said, does she have the right to speak? Can she talk? And eventually, Charles Winnezui, the foreign minister, said no. We had a number of meetings with Winnezui, and it was clear he did not view Aristide in a favorable light, that he was accepting the U.S. version that this was a fallen dictator, et cetera. This press conference went over like a lead balloon, so then they had to hold another the next day, and that's where Aristide spoke. But even this press conference was, we could say, very constrained. Aristide spoke in French.
And this is the one that could be filmed.
That one was filmed. The press was there in force. But immediately after he spoke in French, CNN said, could you give the version in English, just so nothing's lost in translation? And he did. And immediately after that, the foreign minister intervened to say, I'm sorry, but there will be no more questions in English. So he was essentially making the conditions of the interview one. Perhaps it was that they wanted to be able to follow exactly what was being said, or perhaps they wanted to limit its effect. But that was the essence of the press conference, and they curtailed it to only about 4 or 5 questions after that.
Now, when you got to speak with Aristide directly, you mentioned in the article, or the statement you've written, the events leading up to the coup, and why it was particularly on this weekend, the 28th and the 29th, that all of these events unfolded. Because the American public has largely been told that the U.S. government moved in to assist to prevent a massacre or a chaos in Haiti. But what are some of the events that have not come to light that you were able to glean from your discussions with President Aristide?
Well, one of the things that Aristide told us was that for him, one of the reasons they had to move that night, that Saturday night, was because the South Africans had sent a plane load of rifles and ammunition to support the police, who were basically outgunned by the rebel, quote-unquote, rebel forces. We have to remember the rebel forces had new M16s and other armor-piercing ordnance, etc. And so the plane load was due to arrive Sunday. Furthermore, there was talk that the Venezuelans were going to send help. While we weren't able to go into it, into the question of the Venezuelans with Aristide, and I should say that our discussions with him were somewhat constrained because a lieutenant colonel from the communications ministry was sitting right across the table from us as we spoke. So although we spoke in Creole in an effort to circumvent his eavesdropping, but it was still, there's enough common words in Creole and French to make that a little difficult.
Would you have been able to speak quietly in English the whole time?
Hard to know. I think they might have spoken English. That was our assumption. So we chose Creole to continue the discussions.
And you also mentioned that there was that there were some U.S. Congress members that were due to come down to the country as well.
Well, yes. Maxine Waters had tried mightily to join the delegation. In the end, it wasn't possible, and we had to really scramble. I have to say, it was a real ordeal trying to get this over there, and we had real trouble from every logistical point of view. In carrying this out.
It's quite astounding to listen to the comments of the Bush administration officials. One of them along the way was that when he stopped and was at Antigua as they were refueling, not knowing where they were going, ending up going to the Central African Republic, he was able to speak with CARICOM leaders. Now a statement has come out of the CARICOM community, 15 countries in the Caribbean, condemning the kidnapping, the ouster, and calling for a full investigation. Then they said that he had been denied amnesty. This is front page New York Times, had been denied political political exile in South Africa. So that night I went over to meet the South African ambassador to the United Nations and asked why they had, or if in fact they had denied him South African sanctuary. And he said, no, he never applied. And now we see this delegation coming. Right,
and there's a delegation coming. I think it's a delicate problem for him because on the one hand, he doesn't want to look for political asylum. He wants to go back immediately to Haiti, and asking for political asylum is an acknowledgement that you're going to be out of the country for a while, on the one hand. And two, I think he recognizes the difficult political situation that a country like South Africa is facing. They took a lot of heat for the support and standing by Haiti during the bicentennial celebrations, and there's an electoral season in South Africa, so he's quite aware that these dynamics are taking place, and I think that is making some sort of consideration of that. So the same is true for Central African Republic. He has not made a request for political asylum there, and so he's in some sort of limbo in this respect.
Has Aristide, did he directly say to you, I'm being held prisoner?
No, he did not. He, on the contrary, had to keep insisting he was not being held prisoner, but the facts speak for themselves. You can see the difficulty just to get there, to phone there, to see him, the manifest hostility, or I should say disapproval of the Central African authorities, at least the ones we were dealing with primarily in the foreign ministry. Central Africa is itself a very it's a coalition government of sorts that came into power through a coup. It itself is in not a high state of stability and
dire poverty, also very dependent on the United States and France.
Exactly.
Interesting how Iraq was a U.S.-British-led force. This is a U.S.-French-led operation. In fact, didn't Aristide say he holds the French ambassador to Haiti as well responsible for his kidnapping and wants to bring charges?
Yes, the French were involved in all this pressure and, in fact, were in some ways leading the charge. And I think he also explained to us how he arrived in the Central African Republic was a call had the official version is that the plane was in the air and nobody wanted him and they were looking for some place and the Central African Republic was the only place. Well,
Voyage of the Damned.
Right. The reality was that some arrangements were made through Gabon and President Bongo of Gabon, which is the leader of the Central African states. It's sort of the dean of those states. And so Bongo called the Central African Republic and essentially said, listen, you're going to take Aristide. This is what the foreign minister explained to us. So this was done through the U.S., France, Gabon talking. No Haitian officials were involved. Nobody from Haiti was involved. This was a purely U.S.-French operation.
And of course, France, probably more than the United States, had more to lose from Aristide continuing in the presidency since he was beginning to lay claim to reparations from France for the period of colonialism and slavery.
Well, this is precisely it. You had the restitution for $21.7 billion, which was on the table. And we saw a lot of rivalries were put aside to get Aristide out. Between the ruling groups in Haiti, you have the comprador bourgeoisie and the big landowners who generally are constantly squabbling throughout Haitian history for power. They put aside their differences to get together, which we see with Andy Aped representing the bourgeoisie and Guy Philippe and Jodel Chamblin, more the Macoute wing. And we saw the France and the U.S., who have also been sort of vying, put aside their differences. So you saw this unity come between rivals against Aristide because he represented the people and because he was a representative of popular will in Haiti.
How do you account for the thousands of people who came out? The news reports were in support of the ouster of Aristide, calling for him to be returned so he could be tried.
I always put into I take with a huge grain of salt the reports I get from Haiti, because when I've been there, I've seen how they'll transform a crowd of a couple of hundred into thousands.
Jodelle Chamblain signing autographs there and Guy Philippe
Right.
being held up.
Exactly. And so this has been, unfortunately, a lot of the mainstream press takes their lead from the opposition press in Haiti, which is owned by the Haitian bourgeoisie by 70 to 90%. And hence the vision they give is often completely skewed and completely erroneous. Meanwhile, you'll have massive demonstrations, 1 million people almost on February 7th out in support of Aristide. You don't see a picture, you don't hear words about that. So it's a real, you have to take the reporting we get from Haiti with a real grain of salt.
Yeah, it's always, I generally look at where was the staging place for the demonstration. If it started in Patientville, then you know that it represented the upper classes of Haiti.
I saw an interesting report. I don't know if it was AP or Reuters Wire report. Deep down, many paragraphs down, where it's always most interesting to look, usually at the end of a piece, was a quote of a pro-Aristide supporter. When asked why the pro-Aristide forces weren't out last weekend, he said because the U.S. forces are protecting the anti-Aristide forces and we're afraid.
Right, and that's the thing. They constantly blaming the victim, putting the victims as the aggressors, and vice versa. It's
the record of Jodelle Chamblain. We've gone through it before, but just very briefly, because the mainstream media so rarely mentions who these coup leaders are. Just very briefly, Louis Jodelle Chamblain, Guy Philippe, Jean Tatoun, who led the insurrection in Gonaïves, and then Gerard. And then the new prime minister, La Tortue.
Yeah, Jodelle Chamblain was the number 2 of the Frappe Death Squad, created at the suggestion of the CIA, funded by the CIA, responsible in large measure for a majority of the 5,000 killed and disappeared in Haiti during the 1991 to 94 coup d'etat. Guy Philippe, U.S. trained police chief. He had been a soldier, was taken to Ecuador during the coup, where he was trained by U.S. Special Forces, was brought back with a group of 11 others. They were called the Ecuadorians. They were, by and large, police chiefs. They attempted a coup under the Preval administration. It was discovered, which is, again, proof that this isn't just about Aristide, it's about democracy. They were taken to the Dominican Republic despite repeated extradition requests. He was never returned. He's also been accused of drug dealing in Panama and Ecuador. Jean Tatoun was a chief, came up from the underclass of Gonaïves, was also a Frappe head involved in the 1994 Rabateau massacre. Again, here's a guy who you heard so many press reports about Amio Métayer as this terrible chieftain of violence, and yet Tatoun, he's presented almost as a hero.
We only have a minute, but the prime minister now being brought, a chosen prime minister, La Tortue, brought from Florida. Among the first things he has said to have to restore the Haitian military.
Right, and this was the former foreign minister of Leslie Manigat, a neo-devaluerist sector. He is some sort of neo-devaluerist technician. And I think we can expect him to work hand in glove with the U.S. And he was, Leslie Manigat, just to remind listeners, was the president who was installed by the military in 1998 after the election massacre of 1987.
Well, I want to thank you very much for being with us. Kim Ives, an editor of Haiti Progrès, just came back from the Central African Republic, where he met with Aristide and spoke with him in his native Creole. Today at noon at the National Press Club, he and the delegation that went are holding a news conference. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, we're going to learn about a little-known federal law that's become a crucial weapon for prosecutors. It's called 1001, and we'll see what its relation is with Martha Stewart and with civil liberties in general. Stay with us.